You won't believe what happens next, and trust me, you're going to want to see how this all ends. So make sure you're comfortable, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into a story that proves genius can come from the most unexpected places. The cavernous hangar bay of the Naval Research and Development Facility was a temple of cold, hard science, humming with the power of a billion-dollar budget. At its heart, suspended in a complex cradle of steel, was the problem. It was a prototype propulsion unit for a new class of submarine, a labyrinth of pipes, wires, and swirling exotic metals that was supposed to be silent and revolutionary. Instead, it was just silent. It wouldn't start. For 6 months, the nation's top engineers, physicists, and naval architects had huddled over its inert form, their faces etched with a growing despair. The project, codenamed Leviathan, was bleeding money and credibility. Overseeing this expensive failure was Admiral James Thorne, a man whose posture was as rigid as his opinions. His uniform was a canvas of ribbons, each one a story of battles won and commands executed without question. He stood before his assembled team of brilliant minds, his voice a low, contemptuous rumble that echoed in the vast space. This is an embarrassment. A national security imperative, held hostage by a glorified paperweight. He paced slowly, his eyes scanning the faces of the men and women who had dedicated their lives to solving such problems. I am out of patience. I am out of time. Fix this, he mocked, a cruel smile playing on his lips, and I'll give you $100 million from my own RD discretionary fund. A bonus for the savior who can do what all of you cannot. A hushed, stunned silence fell. It wasn't the money, though that was astronomical. It was the sheer, public mockery. The Admiral wasn't offering a reward, he was highlighting their collective failure. The team shuffled back to their workstations, the weight of the challenge heavier than ever. Watching from the periphery, a man named Leo felt the sting of the Admiral's words like a physical blow. He wasn't a distinguished scientist. He was a janitor. A single dad with a weary back and hands that were more familiar with a mop handle than a quantum computer. He had taken the night shift job at the facility precisely because it was quiet, allowing him to be home for his 7-year-old daughter, Maya, during the day. He'd often wheel his cleaning cart past the great, silent engine, wondering at its complexity, but he was invisible to the admirals and the PhDs. That night, the facility was quieter than usual, the air thick with defeat. Leo had brought Maya in for a few hours, a desperate move born of a broken babysitter and no other options. He'd settled her at a small, unused desk in a corner of the hangar bay, far from the sensitive equipment, with a coloring book and a set of well-loved pencils. Just be very quiet, sweetheart. Daddy just needs to finish up, he whispered, smoothing her dark hair. Maya, a child with wide, observant eyes that missed nothing, nodded solemnly. For a while, she colored, creating a vibrant, chaotic world of purple suns and green dogs. But her attention soon drifted to the giant, silent machine in the middle of the room. It fascinated her. To her, it didn't look like a high-tech marvel, it looked like a giant, tangled jungle gym. Leo was mopping the floor near the main access terminal when he heard a small, polite cough. He turned. Maya was standing there, pointing a tiny finger at the Leviathan engine. "Daddy," she said, her voice a small bell in the immense silence. "Why is that machine sad?" Leo smiled, a tired, worn-out smile. "It's not sad, honey. It's just broken. The very smart people can't make it work." Maya considered this, her head tilted. "But it's all tangled up. The spinny parts in the middle are too tight. They can't breathe." She pointed again, more insistently, at a specific part of the engine visible through a clear inspection panel, a central rotor assembly surrounded by a dense web of power conduits and coolant lines. "If you just move that red wire over there, the spinny part could dance." Leo's first instinct was to shush her, to guide her back to her coloring. But something in her certainty gave him pause. Maya had a unique way of seeing the world, of simplifying the complex. She saw emotions and inanimate objects, patterns where others saw chaos. He walked over to the panel and looked. He didn't understand the quantum mechanics, but he understood mechanics. He'd fixed every broken appliance in their tiny apartment with patience and logic. And he saw what she saw: a central rotor, the heart of the machine, was physically constrained by a poorly routed, thick cluster of cables and a secondary coolant pipe. It wasn't an electronic flaw, it was a simple, stupid, physical one. The spinny part didn't have room to achieve its initial rotation. His heart hammered against his ribs. It was insane. A child's observation. He'd be fired for even suggesting it. But the Admiral's mocking voice echoed in his memory. Fix this. He looked at his daughter's hopeful, earnest face. What was the worst that could happen? Humiliation? He was already a janitor. Taking a deep breath, he walked over to the night shift supervisor, a kind-hearted engineer named Dr. Aris. Dr. Aris, Leo began, his voice trembling slightly. My daughter broken bar. She pointed something out. It's probably nothing. About a broken bar. Dr. Aris, tired and defeated, was about to dismiss him. But he saw the genuine plea in Leo's eyes. What is it, Leo? She thinks a broken bar. She thinks the central rotor is entangled. That if we rerouted this cluster of cables and this coolant pipe, it would have room to a broken bar to dance. Aris stared at him, then at the small girl waving from across the hangar. He was about to laugh, but the words struck a chord. They had modeled everything, tested every software algorithm, every material stress point. But the simple physical obstruction? A design flaw so basic it was invisible to them precisely because it was too obvious. It was the purview of a maintenance crewman, not a theoretical physicist. He walked to the panel, his expertise tracing the lines Maya had indicated. His breath caught. My God, he whispered. He immediately called a small, discreet team. There was no fanfare, no announcement to the Admiral. For 2 hours, they worked with a frantic, quiet intensity, carefully disconnecting and rerouting the cabling and the pipe, creating a clear, unobstructed path for the central magnetic rotor. As the sun began to paint the sky with hints of dawn, they were ready. Dr. Aris, his hands shaking, initiated the startup sequence. There was no deafening roar. Instead, a low, resonant hum filled the hangar bay, a sound so pure and powerful it felt like the very air was vibrating in approval. The central rotor began to spin, first slowly, then accelerating into a smooth, silent blur of the motion. Lights across the control panels, which had stubbornly remained dark for months, glowed to life. The Leviathan was breathing. The news reached Admiral Thorne before he'd even had his first coffee. He stormed into the hangar, expecting to find Dr. Aris and his team celebrating. He found them instead, standing in a semicircle around Leo, who was holding a sleepy Maya in his arms. What is the meaning of this? Thorne boomed. How did you a broken bar? Dr. Aris turned, a triumphant yet solemn look on his face. We fixed it, Admiral. The solution wasn't in our complex models. It was a simple design flaw. A physical obstruction. Who found it? The Admiral demanded, his eyes scanning the team. Slowly, every person in the circle turned their gaze not to Leo, but to the small child in his arms. Maya, emboldened by the silence, looked at the imposing man in the uniform. The spinny part can dance now, she said simply. Admiral Thorne was a man carved from granite, but in that moment, the granite cracked. He looked from the humming, living engine, to the brilliant scientists nodding in confirmation, to the janitor, and finally to the little girl with the crayon smudge on her cheek. The mockery, the arrogance, the $100 million challenge, it all crumbled into dust. He had been defeated not by a superior intellect, but by a child's unfiltered perception. He walked forward, his steps slow and heavy. He didn't look at Leo. He looked directly at Maya. Young lady, he said, and his voice, for the first time anyone could remember, was soft. You have done what my entire department could not. He then turned to Leo, a profound respect in his eyes. The money is yours. A deal is a deal. It will be transferred first thing this morning. Leo could only stare, his mind reeling. $100 million. It was a number that had no meaning. It was a future for Maya. Security. And education. a life without struggle. But the story doesn't end with the money. The real victory was what happened after. Admiral Thorne, humbled and wiser, didn't just write a check. He instituted a new policy at all RD facilities, the Fresh Eyes Initiative. Once a month, a group of local schoolchildren would be invited to tour the labs and look at the problems. Not to mock them, but to tape into the pure, uncluttered logic of a child's mind. He also created a full-ride scholarship in Maya's name for young women pursuing engineering. Leo didn't quit his job immediately. He transitioned into a new role, created just for him, the facility's senior systems intuition analyst. His job was to look at complex systems with the practical, straightforward eyes of a fixer, a problem solver, a dad. He and Maya were no longer invisible. So, what's the inspiring message here? It's that we often become so expert, so buried in our own complexity, that we miss the simple, elegant solution right in front of us. Genius isn't always about having the most knowledge. Sometimes, it's about having the clearest perspective. It's a reminder to never underestimate anyone, whether it's the janitor pushing a mop or a child holding a crayon, because the next world-changing idea could come from the most unexpected voice. If this story reminded you to look at your own challenges from a new angle, if it gave you a little bit of hope, then do us a favor or give this video a thumbs up, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove the world is still full of wonderful, unexpected solutions. Thanks for watching.